Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday evening to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there, feeling fantastic because it is a Friday night and having a great start to your weekend. I got you a pretty big update this evening discussing a couple topics, one being the severe weather-packed weekend we have ahead of us. We've already had a pretty active work week. We've unfortunately had fatalities in a small town in Texas. This town got hit very hard, several injuries, just a lot of damage in the town. We had a fatality in Florida, in the panhandle of Florida, I believe, yesterday or overnight. And it's just been very active, and it's very unfortunate news. And typically, once it gets into June, a lot of the severe weather shifts north. We typically don't see it in the areas of the country that we have been seeing it over the last several days. But here we are. This is going to continue into the weekend. So we'll talk about it. We'll give you some updated information this evening on that and try to keep you guys ahead of the storm. Also, want to speak on the tropics. We'll get detail with that, how unusual it is to potentially get a named storm, which will be Brett, which I'm thinking we're likely going to have here in the next few to several days into next week. In the main development region, we call that the MDR for short, and that is basically the tropical Atlantic, which is typically an area of the tropics that does not get active until like the end of July, August, and early September. So it's pretty unusual. We'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about something called a cutoff low and how it is going to be very difficult to figure out next week, but it's most likely going to give everybody in the southeast a lot of rain. Not everybody, but almost everybody will just be socked in clouds and rain, but certain areas will potentially see flooding rains, and we'll talk about that also. So I want to mention this evening I got the entire house to myself. The entire weekend I will. Thank you for the thoughts and prayers for my wife and my family making their way down into Alabama. They're almost in Alabama right now. Somehow they got through Atlanta without heavy traffic. So God is good with that, because every time I drive through Atlanta when I'm storm chasing in Alabama, the traffic is horrid. It is awful. Somehow they made it straight through 5 o'clock traffic in Atlanta on a Friday. So I don't know how that happened, but it did. Continue prayers that they get there. Thank y'all for that so much. And I do want to mention I'm watching 3 dogs, 4 cats this weekend. So if you hear any barks, you hear any meows, you hear any ringing of any bells from any collars, apologize. I'm going to do my best to stay on track with this video. And also, both my neighbors on both sides are enjoying their Friday night. Both of them have pools, and they're over there yelling, watching the College World Series, and just having a good time. It's Friday night in the South, and we're just having a good time. So we're going to punch through this video, give you some good information. I'm going to let you guys get on with the rest of your night. All right, so today, we still have the slight risk, right? Ongoing severe weather right now, some powerful storms near the Alabama-Mississippi line. These are drifting southeast out to northwest. So we're going to continue to run the risk between now and to the overnight hours of severe weather. We've had severe weather over the last several hours in the mid-Atlantic. It's been very active. We're not going to get detailed on what's going to happen between now and to the overnight hours, but I'm not expecting it to be quite as active into the overnight hours as maybe last night and the night before. But please be aware, in these areas you see on the screen that we discussed this morning, severe weather is possible. Getting into tomorrow, again, we have a level 3 out of 5. The orange area you see, that is an enhanced risk. Okay, so the damaging wind threat and the hail threat has increased a great bit. So we have this large slight risk, which expands from the southeast Colorado area all the way to the Little Rock, Arkansas, Shreveport, Louisiana, down to Dallas, all the way up to Wichita, Kansas. Enhanced risk basically includes 90% of Oklahoma. Everybody except the panhandle of Oklahoma, okay? Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Woodward, Weatherford, everybody in this region. There's also a risk down here that you do not need to ignore. That's a slight risk that basically takes you from Gulfport, Mississippi, all the way down to just north of Miami. A good chunk of Florida, I would say 80% of Florida is under a slight risk, level 2 out of 5 risk of thunderstorms. The tornado risk is low in both areas. Only a 2% risk. You're thinking, well, we got an enhanced risk. Shouldn't we at least have a 5% risk of a tornado? Remember, everything isn't all about tornadoes. Yes, that is the most dangerous thing, but this is driven off hail and wind, really. But a 2% risk, we'll watch to see if this increases. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm watching a 5% risk in this area. and the 2% risk somewhere in southern Alabama, the panhandle of Florida. I'm watching this area. I'll talk about why here in a second. But we have a 2% risk in these two green areas. The wind threat, though, we got the traditional 15% risk that we normally do with a slight. That's a 15% risk of winds exceeding 50 knots or higher mile per hour readings. That's 55 to 60 miles per hour in the yellow area. Okay, right here in this region, we have the 15% risk surrounding the 30% risk. So in the red area you see on your screen, which, like I said, includes like 85, 90% of Oklahoma, you have a 30% risk of winds exceeding 50 knots or higher, 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles on any given point. But you see the hatch risk, the black outline region. Remember, that is a 10% risk of significant weather. And in this case, it would be winds, which means you have a 10% chance to see winds exceeding 65 knots or higher. 65 knots is around 74 to 75 miles per hour reading. So that's around hurricane force winds. Hurricane force winds start at 75 miles per hour or higher. So you basically have a 10% risk to see winds exceeding hurricane force winds in this black outline region. This includes Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and everybody points northwest. Hail threat, also large. 15% risk down here of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. You also have the 30% risk of hail exceeding that same criteria. But you also have the 10% risk of significant hail, which is hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger, a 10% risk of that within 25 miles in any given location. Big time severe weather tomorrow, just not a big time tornado threat as of now. This very well could change. This could change. We all know that. But another day, 48 hours later, if we take it from last night to tomorrow night, powerful explosive thunderstorms in this region. Okay, we'll take a look at the HRRR model for this region tomorrow, and we're not going to talk about the ingredients. You basically have an explosive environment for thunderstorms. We might go over it a little bit in the morning, but it's kind of the same environment, except you're lacking kinetics up here, which you had more kinetics. Kinetics is that term for a favorable winds aloft or a spin in the atmosphere. More favorable conditions for a tornado threat. But in this case, the HRRR model likes this idea, the latest. Remember, this is not a grand conclusion. It likes a pretty intense area of strong storms moving out of southeast Colorado around 5 or 6 p.m. If you're confused about what time frame we're at, remember this is in Eastern time. Back it up 1 hour. You got an area of storms right here in North Texas. Okay, these are blasting through areas, all this towns and communities just west of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then we'll stop it here. It's around 8 p.m. Central time. Nasty area storms knock on the doorstep of Dodge City, Kansas. These are starting to really emerge in northwest Oklahoma. There's a weird gap right in here. But if this is what actually happens, which it's not, it's going to look a little different. You have intense storms producing large hail, damaging winds, and an isolated tornado threat, especially with this cluster right up here in southwest Kansas. If you're in southwest Kansas, I'd be mindful of this, okay? And then the HRRR model around late evening, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Saturday night. If you got any activities, the HRRR model wants to crush you guys with a pretty intense line of storms that could produce large hail, damaging winds, hail pushing gigantic size, softball, baseball size hail in this region. But you're likely going to have storms in the middle of this. Okay, this is just one run of the HRRR model, and this is what it shows. So this line of storms continues to trail off into the overnight hours. My folks in Northeast Texas, please be aware of this. This could rock your area, well after dinner time tomorrow night. This begins to drift into northern Louisiana, southern Arkansas, and then we'll watch this cluster of storms. I'm not sure how Oklahoma City did last night. I didn't hear much out of that area. Honestly, I go to bed really early, 8:39, so I went to bed after the storms rolled through the area. But I know areas, what's the town called? I'm brain farting. But I know areas west of Oklahoma City got hit pretty hard with some big time hail and a couple tornadoes. But, this is 2 a.m. in the morning tomorrow night, Sunday morning. And you got some intense storms rumbling through most of Oklahoma. And then, Sunday morning, we're waking up to intense storms again in northeast Texas, southeast Oklahoma. Okay, so this is kind of that's the gist of what's going to happen tomorrow. But remember, you look at all this, This is throughout the entire afternoon, evening tomorrow. Remember, the storms could very well be in this region. They could be up here. Okay, they could be more so over here. We'll go over this again tomorrow morning like we always do. Just know, powerful storms in the enhanced risk area tomorrow. The ingredients will be there for anybody to see it. Florida and my folks in the deep south, you guys have been producing tornadoes. You were last night. You were this morning. Again, and I'm a little bit worried about my wife and the family. And they live they don't live there, but they're visiting their grandparents in a small town where they grew up in Excel, Alabama, which is right here in Alabama. They're going to be in a corridor of some pretty nasty storms into the overnight hours into tomorrow. But, we'll start off around 9 a.m. tomorrow. We could already have some showers and storms possible along the west coast, southern Big Bend areas of Florida. We keep this going. We'll stop it here. It's around 10, 11 a.m., around lunchtime. Powerful storms already firing up. There you got some in southwest Georgia, southern Alabama. These storms are rumbling through. And by the time you get to kind of 1 p.m., just after lunchtime, you kind of have like a multi-cluster area of storms. Some of these could be discrete, and I would not rule out there's going to be some winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere that does support a little bit of a spin to these storms. I think some of these could get supercell in nature, and I think you're going to run a risk for the extreme southern portions of these states in the western panhandle of Florida for tornado risk sometime tomorrow afternoon. I think these storms will try to spin just as they get off the coast and get into the northern Gulf of Mexico. So please watch if you're in the panhandle of Florida. These storms will not only could produce large hail, damaging winds, of course, but I would watch for a higher tornado threat than what they're thinking right now in this region. I would watch for a little skinny corridor of a 5% risk to get issued in this region. I really would. We'll see what happens. But when you get into 4 or 5 p.m., these storms are still firing up in this region. And not to ignore you guys in the peninsula of Florida, but a very stormy afternoon for you folks too. It will freeze it here 5 p.m. Storms in Jacksonville, Gainesville, storms in Tampa Bay. You got storms down here north of Miami. It's going to be hard to predict exactly where these are. Even some storms as far north as the low country of South Carolina. But these definitely will be producing big time weather. And then you could still be dealing with some severe storms making their way kind of across the extreme northeast portion of the Gulf of Mexico. You very well could get storms that move off the panhandle of Florida, then re-drift back into the west coastline of Florida into the overnight hours tomorrow night. And then you could be greeted by another line of storms waking up Sunday morning in southern Alabama and Mississippi. This is the updraft Felicity swath through Sunday morning, and it really likes these little areas right in here. Remember, this doesn't tell us there's going to be a 100% chance of a tornado. It tells us where some of these storms are going to be spinning. And this is what the latest long-range HRRR model likes. There's a spin in the atmosphere with these storms. That does not mean it's going to latch and you're going to get a tornado. But it does mean that some of these storms could potentially produce a tornado. So please be careful. If you're vacationing in the panhandle of Florida, southern Alabama, Mississippi, for a low-end tornado threat, it's definitely going to be there. Sunday, there's not a ton to talk about on Sunday. All we know is there's a large, slight risk. This has a high ceiling, but there's low confidence on this. But what they're thinking is you're going to have maybe a couple rounds of lines of storms that sweep through this area of kind of the southern Mississippi Delta region. Okay. And we got to see what happens. And right now you just got a 15% risk of severe weather. Okay. And I think the highest threat with this might be damaging winds and hail again, but we'll start off Sunday morning. You're already waking up to severe weather. Okay, probably, and portions of Arkansas, northeast Texas, southeast of Oklahoma. You keep this in motion. What does the morning convection do with the afternoon convection Sunday in Arkansas? It's a big question here. You get this pretty big gap, and you stop it here, and this is for about 1 p.m. Central Time in Arkansas, Mississippi, surrounding regions. And what forms after this time frame? It's a big question mark. So I think it depends a lot on this morning convection. What else refires in this region as we get into the afternoon hours? It's a question that we got to figure out. So we'll continue to keep you guys updated all weekend on this. I'll have 2-a-days all weekend. You got the update on the tropics. So let's break this down. As of right now, I want to let you guys know at 8 p.m. when they issue another update, the eastern the 8 p.m. Eastern time update, this will probably increase to a red, which will be 70% or higher. Would not be surprised one bit. So it's not that I'm deliberately showing you guys update old information. It's because as of around 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, I only have the 2 p.m. update. But this has been increasing by 10% every 6 hours. So this will likely be a 70% chance. As of right now, it has a 60% chance to develop within the next 7 days. A 20% chance to develop within the next 48 hours, but it's not going to develop in the next 48 hours. This is probably going to become Brett, our B-named storm. Brett without 2 T's, just Brett with 1 T. But Brett is going to be abnormal. But I'm pretty confident we're going to have Brett out here, and I'll talk about why. But this is it. It's just a tropical wave. It looks more unhealthy than it did this morning, but it's just this is what all tropical waves look like. Some of them look more robust, some of them look anemic, but right now, just an area of showers and storms. They're ongoing in the eastern tropical Atlantic. This is Africa, off the coast of Africa. So we'll compare and contrast some model guidance, and we'll run through this pretty quickly. We'll show you the latest Euro. We'll start off for Sunday morning. Okay, remember, the lower this number goes, the stronger a system. High pressure up here, keeping this pretty low in latitude right now, from the north to south kind of orientation. So you keep this going, it's pretty far south. We take it all the way to Tuesday morning. We got 1,008 millibar low pressure. So you're steadily gaining some strength, but I think it's going to take all the way to mid to late next week before we get a named storm. We could have a tropical depression earlier on, but this is when that number begins to steadily drop. 1,006 millibar low pressure next Tuesday evening, and then you get sub 1,000 millibar low pressure storm maybe as early as next Wednesday. And at this point, anytime from what I've seen, anytime you get a below 1,000 millibar low pressure storm, you're pushing tropical storm status at this point. So this gets here, you might have tropical storm Brett at this point. This is the European too; it's reliable. As it strengthens, it begins to make that turn, gain that kind of northerly directional pull to it, okay? You lose the placement of the high pressure. You still have weak ridging right into here. Even though you don't see an H, you got weak ridging in here, but it's starting to sneak and find a weakness right into here. This begins to turn, but I mean, at this point, this is kind of getting just north of the Lesser Antilles, right? Which is this region right here, Greater Antilles, Lesser Antilles. It's getting just north. It's making that turn. Remember, this isn't exact science. This isn't exact forecast. We get to 8 days from now. This is making that turn. We got a full-fledged hurricane based off the European model next Sunday morning. Making that turn, thank the good Lord, it's looking like it's turning. But, of course, we don't have all the information. Ridging has shifted further east. It's finding a weakness right in here, and it's turning. All right, so European has development. GFS, latest GFS, it wants to develop this much quicker. By the time we get into Monday morning, we have Tropical Storm Brett. And this is a full-fledged hurricane by the time we get to about early to midweek next week, okay? 979 millibar low pressure. But remember, GFS likes to be off its rocks sometimes. Likes to be drunk, and usually does it on a happy hour, which we consider 18Z the happy hour run, the afternoon run. But you keep this rolling. It's a 967 millibar low pressure. It's about a Category 2 hurricane, moving just outside the Lesser Antilles, but it's making that turn. This thing builds this all the way to a sub 960 millibar low pressure hurricane. Bermuda, this little dot right here, but it's turning out to sea. But man, this is going to be a storyline next week. I am telling you guys. Okay, Icon strengthens it too. Now, Icon's only going to go out 120 hours, but we'll take it out. And I think Icon's very reasonable, maybe on the low end compared to all the other model guidance. And it takes us out to about Wednesday afternoon. It's got 1,006 millibar low pressure, beginning to flirt with the Lesser Antilles, okay? But what I can tell you is, you're asking, how are we getting this time of the year? Well, one, you got low shear. Two, you got a nice little moisture plume. So this is pretty cut and dry information, literally. You got dry air in the brown. You got moist air in the greenish colors. It shows it shows if the air is moist in an area of the atmosphere between, what is it? Let me see. Between 300 and 700 millibars. So in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Well, in the upper levels of the atmosphere, how much dry air do you have interfering with the center of circulation? Where, well, if you notice, here's the low pressure, right? Dry air on top, like we normally have this time of the year. Well, this is surrounded by a nice little moisture plume. So it's not being affected by dry air. You're not getting any dry air in the circulation. If you are, it's very minimum. At this point, you're getting all the way to about midweek next week. It's got a nice moisture plume surrounding it. You keep this going, and it's holding its own. Okay, it's beginning to be affected probably a little bit, but this time it's pretty strong. It's probably got a nice moisture column right around the center of circulation, and it's heading on out. But there's no point in going all the way out past 7 days, because that's no man's territory in the model world. All right, but it's got a nice moisture bubble. Another thing we look at is winds at 200 millibars. So really, this is 30, 40,000 feet up in the air, right? So this is basically the area of the atmosphere that we really look for the jet stream. So this is going to show, this is the best, to me, this is one of the best things to look at for wind shear. So what you can see here is this thing's cruising across, and we're looking at the European again, is, tropical systems, remember, they spin like this, right? They spin like that. It's, the anticyclonic flow, okay? So they're spinning like this, and sometimes I get my cyclonic and anticyclonic mixed up, but basically, remember, they spin like this in the northern hemisphere. They spin the opposite way in the southern hemisphere. So you got this spin ongoing. So in the upper levels of the atmosphere, you see these little wind streams, these little arrows, they're spreading out in the total opposite direction. So the winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere are going in the total opposite direction. You're thinking, well, isn't that going to mess things up? Well, no, it doesn't, because you got that low level circulation, right? Is spinning like this, above it spinning like this. What this does is we call this kind of like an anticyclonic flow out here. And basically what it is a ventilation. So you got an opposite spin on the upper levels of this low pressure, right? And this is actually helping to ventilate this storm. So it's actually pushing it's pushing winds and air in the upper levels of the atmosphere away from the center of circulation, allowing for more air to rise. So pushing air away, allowing for more air to rise. Pushing air away, allowing for more air to rise. So it's actually helping to ventilate this storm. And here it is. You got this flow on top that's totally supportive. So we call this a ULAC, and that is weather terminology, and basically that stands for upper level anticyclone. So basically when you have one of these overhead with these tropical systems, it helps them to breathe. So you're pushing air away from the center of circulation, allowing for more air to rise. And we all know, well, not all of us, but we know that rising air, more convection, sinking air, more stable air. Yes. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of like every time we enter a new season, whether it's hurricane season, whatever it may be, severe weather season, winter season, it's like I have to kind of revamp my mind for that season. So the flow at which I speak, talking all these weather terminology things, gets a lot better in time. So if that was very confusing or I said something, certainly correct me in the comments, but you guys know I'm everywhere sometimes. So above, and basically what you're seeing here is sea surface temperature anomalies in Celsius. So it's not in Fahrenheit, but basically look at this and see the big area of red and orange and yellow, well above average temperatures in the tropical Atlantic for this time of the year. So the sea surface temperatures are very warm. They're supportive for tropical development, which is one of the ingredients needed for tropical development. We've known this. You've probably heard about this, even if you're not very involved in the weather community. You got rocket fuel as far as sea surface temperatures out here for tropical development. And you mix that with low shear, moist bubble, and kind of an anticyclone above this system, pushing air away, allowing for ventilation. You got the recipe for rare early season development in the tropical tropical Atlantic. One other thing we look at is steering currents, guys, and you see this little blob of blue right here. That is our system. Okay, that's our system right here spinning away. And you see this orange, that is very weak ridging. The more you see the darker orange into the red, that's stronger ridging, more of an influencing ridge in place. So you keep this going, Okay, and you notice this ridge is getting weakened probably by this upper trough right here. It's probably knocking down this ridge. It's probably weakening it. But there is still a bit of ridging in place. So this is still keeping it kind of south, but we start to get into late next week, and it really starts to feel weakness into here. And then a ridge actually is beginning to try to build over the northeast, maybe eastern Canada. And just in general, it finds that weakness, which is wide open. And a stronger storm system likes to gain latitude a lot more than a weaker system. A weaker system is pushed around a lot more easily. A stronger system, excuse me, will hold its own against the upper atmospheric players on the table, if that makes sense. Like I said, we'll be able to explain this a lot more when we get into next week. But so what I'm trying to say is it really looks like this system's going to go out to sea. The next topic that I want to discuss, and we'll go over through this very quick, is something called a cutoff low. We'll start this off Monday morning. This coming Monday morning, the 19th. What you see in this big area of blue, this is a cutoff low pressure. And basically what this is doing is, it's basically just an upper level low, and it's just spinning around in the southeast. These cutoff lows they basically get lost from the main flow of things, and they just kind of spin around Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They just kind of spin around place. So what you're going to have, because of this big blue thing on your screen, you're going to have a lot of cooler air and a lot of shower and storm activity. You can see it well in the European. You get this big blob of green that comes in early next week. And look at this just big blob of green and yellow. That's shower and storms just plaguing the southeast and the deep south all next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. What does that mean as far as rainfall? Well, it means a lot of rain. So we'll start it off early next week, and then we'll take it all the way through next weekend, all the way till next Sunday morning. And this is how much rain could potentially fall. A lot more rain than this will fall, but a lot of rain to come, guys. 3 to 5 inches of rain is possible for a widespread area across the southeast and deep south. I did not mean for that video to go as long as it did, but here we are. Hope that helped you guys. We'll get you another update in the morning. God bless, and have a great start to your weekend.